This is X. St. Anderson. Welcome to the Principal Podcast today. Today, I'm thrilled that we have my friend, Joe Skinner. Joe is not only a friend, he's also the host of the Dad Cave, and he's a realtor in the state of Iowa. He's a father, a husband. Thanks for being on the show with us, Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to do this.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is because um, I wanted to ask about your journey to fatherhood.
Yeah. So I had what some would call a non-traditional journey to fatherhood. I don't know. I'm still struggling on how to put this when it does come up. It doesn't come up that often, but when it does come up, um, I found out a while ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. Well, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I found out that I cannot have children. Um, when my wife and I got married, the decision, we both really wanted kids, we both really wanted a family, and the decision was made that we weren't going to wait. We were going to, just we were going to go for it. We were going to live our lives. If it happened, it happened. 5 years down the line, 4 or 5 years down the line, nothing was happening, and we couldn't figure out why. We went to the doctor. Everything was fine on her end. On my end, we started doing all the tests and procedures and everything, even going as far as surgery, to figure out that all of the infertility was on my side. Um, and we had we had some options ahead of us, that we had to really pray about and um, really lean heavy on our faith, because the biggest decision was going to be, do we just move forward with our lives knowing that we probably won't have children, or do we find a way to have children? Um, and one thing that she and I both really strongly felt was that we were meant to have kids. So we started looking into donors. We started going through a cryobank in it was in Washington. Now it's moved to California. But we started going through cryobanks and searching donors, and that led into its own unique. There were struggles there as well. We had very specific requirements that we had to meet, or risk health issues on the baby. My wife and the donor had to be completely compatible, because it could we could run the risk of birth defects and stuff like that. And so it became overwhelming at that point. One, um, it was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around that we were going this route. But 8 months later, once we chose our donor, it took 8 months, going every single week into the fertility clinic. Or not every single week, every single month into the fertility clinic, and that took its own mental toll on both of us. But we pushed through, and on the very last try that we had, and I call them tries, on the very last try that we had, we found out that we were pregnant with twins. So not just one, but two. And I remember this moment so clearly, because the nurse, or the ultrasound tech who was doing the ultrasound, literally deadpan. I can't see anything. I can't even see the image at this point. Literally deadpan just goes, "Are you guys ready for this? You're having twins." And I was just like, no emotion whatsoever from her, but for us, it was just like, oh my gosh, we need to start preparing because we're having twins. And fast forward a couple years, because we go through IUI, we schedule things. We can schedule pretty much everything. And so we were like, okay, once the boys hit a certain age, we're gonna try for another one. And so the boys turned, I think, 18 months, and we were like, okay, we don't know how long it's going to take us. We know we want them to be at least two when the baby's born. So we started at 18 months, and it took 2 months this time, two tries. That's all. And that blew both of us away. And this was, almost 18 months ago. We had our baby girl, and she has blessed our lives. And then, here this year, we're going to start trying again for number four and last. So we're kind of excited for that.
It must have been a little bit of a journey for you emotionally as you found out that you couldn't have kids and then made this decision to have kids
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. So, like I said earlier, like it was hard for me to wrap my head around that we were making this decision because it was, um, I have always wanted kids. I've always wanted a big family. Just ask my parents. I used to pretend like I would tell them I'm spending time with my kids, um, with my 100 kids or 50 kids or whatever. Um, and when I was really little, so I've always wanted a big family. I'm not saying I want 50 kids or I wanted 50 kids as I got older, but I always wanted a big family. And so to find out that I couldn't, and we don't know if this is because of an injury or if I was born this way or what. But to find out that I couldn't do it was a huge blow. And to find out like and we went through every option that we could to try and figure out why can't I do this? And we tried to figure out every option that we had before going with that, and mentally it was so hard because I was like, I really want this. I want to have kids, but am I really going to be okay with doing it this way? Am I really ever going to see them as my kids? And I had to go through that mental struggle. And looking back, therapy probably would have helped a lot, but I didn't go that route. Um, and so it was a little bit of a mental struggle for sure.
So, what got you through it?
Um, I turned I turned to the internet. I found support. I found a support group of other dads who have been through the exact, doing it the exact same way that we have. Um, and that was a big one. Just talking to other dads who were like, "Yeah, man, we get it. We get where you're coming from. We get your concerns. We get what you're going through." That was one of the biggest things. The other thing was my faith. I mean, honestly, um, if I didn't have my faith, I probably wouldn't. I probably would have ended this a long time ago and just said, you know what, it's not worth it. But I knew that God had a plan for us and that we were supposed to have kids. Um, and the third thing that got me through it was my dad. So my dad is not my biological father, and you know my dad. Um, but when I didn't find out that he wasn't my biological father until I was 28 years old. And when I found that out, I was so upset. This is 7 years ago. This is only 7 years ago. But I was so upset. And my sister came to me and said, "Look, no, he's not your biological father, but you are. He loved you so completely that you never once even questioned if he was your father or not." And to me, I was just like, that's the kind of dad I want to be. If we have to do it this way, then I am going to be that dad. I am going to love my children so completely that they never, ever question that I am their dad. And I probably
I
won't wait
love it.
until they're in their 20s to tell them, what we had to go through. But I understand why my dad waited so long to tell me. And even still today, he hates bringing it up, and he hates it being brought up because to him, he is my dad, and he doesn't want it to be like an identifying factor in our relationship. Um, but and so I understand why my dad did it that way. Um, but at the same time, I want our kids to know what we went through to bring them here. You know.
Yeah, I appreciate sharing that. And your dad is a good man and his example. Tell us a little, yeah, just a side note here. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your father and the things that he did for you growing up.
So yeah, I mean, granted, I probably should have known something was amiss because I look nothing like my dad. My dad is 6 foot, blonde hair, blue eyed, and I am 5'4", darker skinned. Not darker skinned, but tanner, more tan. Um, and that was so I should have known something was up, but I still never questioned it. My dad and I went through a lot. We growing up, we never really saw eye to eye on a lot of things, and still some things today we don't. But I never questioned if he loved me or anything like that. My dad taught me how to work really hard for the things that I enjoy. And my dad and I worked on cars together. He taught me, he made sure that I knew how to change the oil, how to change a tire. He taught me all of these life skills. And even today, he's still teaching me. I work with him, so I see him every single day. And we joke, we laugh, we have a ton of fun together. But growing up, it was kind of hard. I still remember my dad was going through his own health issues, and I still remember the meds that he was on made him very tense a lot, and so we would butt heads and we would fight a lot, but we always got through it. Catherine hates this. My wife hates this part because in my family we don't really talk about what happened. If we get into a fight, we're just like a couple days later after we've had some time to cool on, it's we'll send each other a message and say, hey, what are you doing today? And it'll be like nothing ever happened. My sister, my wife hates that because she feels like we
Mhm.
don't resolve anything, but I feel like we do. We just have learned to move past it and to keep going.
Thanks for sharing that. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. There are obviously many men who find themselves in the same situation as you found yourself in years ago, where they're finding out that they're not able to have kids. What would you tell those men?
Don't give up. Um, I remember going through the first 7 tries that we went through. We every single month it was a new battle to say we're gonna keep going. And they told us, you know what? After 4 tries, if it still hasn't happened, it most likely won't. And we were just like, we know that we're supposed to keep going, and we're gonna keep going, and till we don't have a choice to other, we don't have any other choice. But I think on the 8th try, I I was laying there. I was laying on our bed, and Catherine had gone into the bathroom to do a pregnancy test, and I hear her say my name behind me, and she just says Joe, and my head just dropped. I was laying on my stomach, my head just dropped, and I was just like, in my head, I'm just going, what am I going to tell her? How am I going to strengthen her? That was our last try. What are we going to do now? And I turn around and she's holding a little onesie with the positive pregnancy test. And that moment is burned into my memory. So don't give up. Don't give up. It is possible. It is possible to still have a family. It may not seem like it. It may seem like options are really scarce, but there are ways to make it work. And if that's not your plan, if that's not God's plan for you, then figure out how you can be a father figure in somebody else's life, or figure something out. Some people aren't meant to have kids, and it's unfortunate, and but they figure out how to make it work in other ways. I it's you can still make a difference in somebody's life, as much of a difference as somebody else would. There are so many kids out there that don't have the positive influence of a father in their life. And you can be that positive influence.
How is it? Let me ask you a question. How was it when your children were born for you? Like when you were there, your wife's having the baby. How was that moment for you?
So with the twins, it ended up being an emergency C-section. But there was no doubt in my mind when they did come out that these are my kids. Um, I remember they pulled out they pulled out the first, and I was like, the first words out of my mouth were, "Honey, he looks just like your grandpa." And she was like, "What?" And they gave him to her, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like my grandpa." And then it kind of hit us, and I was just like, "We're now responsible for this tiny human." And then they pulled out the second, and the second one, who was supposed to be the first, and the reason why we had to have an emergency C-section, but the second one came out, and he came out with such a yell that any thought of how we got here was wiped from my mind. And I held him, and I got to cut his umbilical cord, um, and I held him, and I was looking down at him, and this little boy. This just goes to show you, like, this little boy was um, completely alert from the moment from birth. And I was holding him, I was looking down at him, and his eyes are wide open. He's looking around, and I'm just like, wow, this is my son. These are my kids. You know,
So you
I
felt that immediately. There wasn't any sense of, hey, this is not my child. It was a sense immediately of bonding that it was your child. Is that right?
yeah, 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 absolutely. Immediate bond with both of them, and I still have that bond with both of them. You know, the when once you hear a little toddler say "daddy" or "dad" for the first time, it's over. It's over. There will never be any doubt in your mind that that is your child.
Were you worried about it? Now, let me ask you this. Were you worried about when I see these children, maybe I'm not going to feel it, or was there any doubt in your mind prior to their birth?
Yeah, yeah. This was something that Catherine and we talked about at great length. And this was a concern that I had. I was like, what if they come out? They don't look anything like me, and what if in my heart I just don't feel like they're mine? And she just said, "You're not going to feel that way. I know you're not. It's just not going to happen that way." And I was like, "But what if it does?" And she goes, "Stop worrying about it." She goes, "I know who you are as a man, and I know that your heart is pure enough that I don't think that you're going to have any issue with that." And she was right. I didn't. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind once they came out that they were mine.
Great, great to hear that. Let me ask you this: is there ways for people to want who want to find if who their biological father was? Is there a way for them to do that, or is that stuff is that just not on record anywhere?
So for our kids, with the boys, because we went through, the boys have one donor and our daughter has another one. So the way that the cryobank system is set up is, you can choose either an open donor, and the open donor is basically like, yeah, if they ever want to find me, they can come find me. That's fine. There's a half closed. I can't remember what they call it. There's like a halfway mark where they're like, yeah, when they turn 18, you can give them my information. But there's some other stipulations that go along with it. And then there's completely anonymous, where they won't know. With the boys, I think we went through it like a halfway one because that's who we were compatible with. But with our daughter, we went with a completely anonymous donor. So we will never know. It is completely sealed. We'll never know who her donor was. We just, at best, we have a picture of what he looked like as a baby. That's it. So you
Interesting.
can reach out. You can reach out to the cryobank and find out like, hey, this was my donor number. Um, can we start this process? And they go through social services and through family services to set up a time and a meeting place. But most of the time, if you go with a completely anonymous donor, you won't find out because they don't want to be they don't want to be contacted.
Thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else you feel like our viewers could know from your journey that would help them, especially men who may find themselves in the same situation, or families who are struggling? Is there anything else you would tell these families or these men, these women who are saying, "Hey, what, find themselves in a similar situation to you?"
Um, God has a plan for you, and it's up to you to find out what that plan is. What's this year? 2026. 13 years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident, and that motorcycle accident changed my life. I was told that I wasn't going to be able to walk again. I have titanium rods going through my legs. Um, I was changed my career path, changed everything. Um, but I lived, and it took that accident for me to realize I have a purpose. There is a purpose for me in this world. I now need to find it. So God has a plan for you. I hope that you don't have to go through what I did to realize that. But God has a plan for you, and I know that He does. You need to find it. And I'll tell you this, and it'll probably make me cry. I'm gonna try really hard not to. The first time my little boy said "Daddy" was the moment that I knew that I found my purpose. I was supposed to be that little boy's father. I was supposed to be his daddy, and I know that. And as much as that little 3-year-old and I butt heads now, I know that I am his father. Despite what we went through, there's no doubt in my mind that I am his.
Thanks for sharing that, Joe. For people who want to reach out and get more information from you, how can they do that?
Through Facebook, through the Dad Cave Facebook page. It's literally just at Dad Cave, both on Facebook and Instagram. They can reach out to me there. Or if they want to reach out to you, you have my email address, and they can definitely email me.
Wonderful. We'll put the links there in the show notes too, so they can get you directly if they need.
Yeah,
Joe Skinner. What a great example of someone who's just decided to be determined and said, I'm going to find a way. You're a dad now, three times over, maybe four, not
uh,
too long, right?
yeah. Hopefully for this year. So we're gonna start trying for 4 when the baby turns 18 months, which is in April.
Well, that's good for you, Joe. I think really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and thanks again for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Joe. For
Yeah,
those of you listening, make sure to look up Joe. We'll have his contact information in the show notes. And thanks for listening today.
thank you.